All right, so today, like you can see, we will be talking about CUPHEAD, so a game that a few of you have probably heard of. Basically, we as an external code development studio at iLLOGIKA, so we helped out the main guys at MDHR to finish the game. So I'll go into a bit of details about what we did on the game, etc. So, but at any time during the talk, so just if something is not clear, if you have a question, please feel free to ask, and I'll also be taking questions at the end. All right, so plan for this morning. So I'm going to start by telling you a bit more about my company, iLLOGIKA. Also how we got to work on CUPHEAD, so the story behind that. I'm going to go into a bit of details on what we did on the project. So, for example, on the programming, level art side of things, production, QA, etc. Then a few key observations, so like the conclusions and takeaway points, and a few questions at the end. All right, so just a few words by myself. So just to so that you know a bit who I am. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of iLLOGIKA. So I started the company back in 2009. But before that, I was actually a game programmer, computer engineer. I started out at Behavior Interactive in Montreal. Did a couple of years there, doing massive amounts of overtime for crappy PS2 games. And yeah, so I worked there a couple of years. Then afterwards, I actually followed my wife in France. Worked for a year there as a game programmer for Ubisoft, like subsidiary studio. And then I came back to my master's degree in work in GIT. So in engineering management / product management. So my goal was to start a company after that year of study. And then I came back to Montreal in 2009 with a few friends, decided to start iLLOGIKA, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But just before that, I just want to mention that I'm a board member of both the Guild of Independent Game Developers of Quebec and of Alliance Numérique. So the Guild is an association where indie game development studios are members. So we have about 120 companies who are members. So we represent their interests. We do collective bargains for insurance, tax credits, consultants, etc. And we also hold an event, so I'm just plugging it today, so it's called the Mega. It's a bit like a PAX event, so it's a bit smaller currently, but we had our first event back in November, so we'll be announcing the second one for November of this year again, so check it out. That's MEGA Mega, super cool. And Alliance Numérique is the association that regroups all the studios in the province of Quebec, including the big ones like Ubisoft, Warner, etc. So my role on both boards is to pass information along, make sure the indies are well represented, and that we go in the same general direction. So the big studios have an incentive to help the indie studios so that they don't appear to grab all the money for themselves. So because it's not actually true. So I want to showcase the indies. So I'm there to help out on that front. So just a picture. There's about half the team at iLLOGIKA. We're about 40 people. So a cool bunch of guys and girls. Working together. We're in Montreal, actually right next to Ubisoft in the Milan district, so lots of hipsters, expensive coffee around. But it's a cool place to be working at, and yeah, so just in a few numbers. So we were both an indie and Workfire studio. So in all honesty, Workfire is what brings money to the table, for us. But we also develop and publish our own games. I'll talk about our own game in a second. We were founded in 2009, so at first it was very, very small, just me and 3 other guys, not really knowing what we were doing. But then we kind of grew organically over the years. Now we're 40 people doing lots and lots of projects at the same time. Sometimes I'm having trouble to keep up. But yeah, so we work both to help other indie studios like MDHR or companies like Square Enix Montreal. So we ported like probably every different possibility of Lara Croft Go, Hitman Go, and Music Go on all different platforms, Android, Windows, PS4, etc. We also work with interactive agencies to create installations such as augmented reality, virtual reality for training purposes, etc. So we have that branch going on as well, and there's more use cases for VR there so far. But yeah, so we like to keep both our feet in those two different worlds. And yeah, so just talking a bit about Siberia. So there's a larger image there. So this is actually our first original game. It's coming out on May 9th, so very, very soon, on Steam, on PS4, Xbox One, and a few other platforms. So it's just a quick history of that game. So it started as a tribute game for The Binding of Isaac back in 2013, so it's been 5 years. So we had all sorts of issues. First, finding the financing to do the game. It cost roughly about $1 million. And for us, at first, when we started at a 7-people company, it was a daunting challenge to get all that money. So, but because we're in Canada, there's options like the Canada Media Fund. There's Invest Quebec. You might have seen some of the talks earlier talking about that. So we finally secured all that money, but it takes forever, and it's a contest, so you don't always get selected on the first try. And we had to balance all of that with service work such as Jazz CUPHEAD. So when a good project comes in, it's hard to say no and keep working on our own project, because we want to pay the salaries, we want to keep the company alive. So that's probably always been my biggest challenge. Just about Siberia quickly, it's a top-down roguelike game in 3D. You play as Styx, a young girl in a dystopian universe where robots, of course, are trying to kill her. But these robots, you don't have any weapons to attack them with, so you have to trick them into attacking each other or falling into the traps of the level. So once the robots are dead, doors open up, you can progress to the rest of the levels. They're always different every time you play, and it's a roguelike with permadeath, so when you die, it sucks, you start from the beginning. So it's a bit hardcore. I haven't been able to finish it myself yet, but I will. Nor was I able to finish CUPHEAD yet. I suck. All right. So the pièce de résistance now. So how do we got to work on CUPHEAD? So just a bit of history. So back in April 2017, Chad Moldenhauer. So there's a bunch of people called Moldenhauer who are working at MDHR. They're brothers or wives of the brothers, or it's kind of very confusing. But yeah, one of them, Chad, reached out to a buddy of mine, Jean-Sylvain, at Snowden Studios in Ottawa. So I was 2 hours drive from Montreal. I used to work with him back at Behavior. And he reached out to him because his lead programmer, Eric, was told Chad that Snowden could probably help them out because they needed actually some development work to be done to help them out. So I got to talk to Jean-Sylvain at that point. but they were just simply too busy to take on that project. They tried for a couple of days to find a solution, but at the end they just said, okay, Chad, call iLLOGIKA, call David, they might be able to help you out. So he wrote me a nice little intro email. It was very cool of him. So I was actually on a business trip in LA. In between two meetings, got that email, the intro email. Chad replied like almost instantly, and then I just jumped on that email, got on a call on the same day with Chad, and then we had a good exchange about the game. So for an indie title, it was already very well known, so it was like a no-brainer for us to be able to find a solution to help them out. And I had a very good vibe about that first meeting, so as Chad did. So in the initial requirements he had, and that's probably the level of details I had to work with at that point, say for like a presentation about CUPHEAD and standalone. So implementing some missing features, implement a localization system, bug killing, etc. So etc. can mean lots and lots of things, but that was pretty much the gist of it. We got to do a bit more than that. Early May, so a few days afterwards, we relayed our programmers' availability. So we had actually 3 programmers, Unity programmers, who could help out on the project. So they were ready to start late May, early June, with the current projects we had in the pipeline. By the way, we usually work on 3, 4, 6 months projects. So 40 people, 20 programmers. We tend to have people ready pretty like every month. So it's usually pretty easy for us to jump in on a project. So on May 15th, last year, that message from Chad, and that's very typical of his messages. Draw up the paperwork because I am happy to announce that we chose Julien. So Julien's picture right there. So he's one of our senior programmers, and he was super stoked to work on that project. He was very, very happy. So we got to start a couple of days afterwards on the project with just Julien first. But soon, what became apparent is that one programmer would not cut it. Microsoft had set out the deadline for September 29 for the game to release on both Windows and Xbox, and there was lots and lots of work still to be done. And it was actually MDHR's first project, so some of their team members were more experienced, but as a team, they didn't know what their exact velocity in production was, so it was hard for them to estimate exactly what the amount of work was required. So to deal with that deadline, in the end we had 10 people working on the project, so a fourth of our own team assigned to it. So 4 Unity programmers, 2 level artists, 2 QA testers, and 2 producers. Producers were part-time, but the others were full-time on the project. We're still working on CUPHEAD, so making patches, implementing new features, etc. So some of them I can talk about, some of them I can't yet. But so it's been about 10 months since we started work. So it can be split in 2 phases, though the pre-release part, so going from late May to September 29. The last month, like end of August or in September, that's when we had the most people on the project. We had the full-time people working feverishly to meet the deadlines, and we had the post-release after that, which was a bit of a different pace. But at first there were some early patches that were urgently needed, and then we started working more on the maintenance and future updates for the game. I'd like to just say a word about MDHR, because it's a very special team. Not all clients or partners are created equal, so we've dealt with about 150 of them over the last 9 years, and I can honestly, genuinely say that MDHR was probably the best client we had, or easily in the top 3. They are a great team, so the level of craft and loving attention to detail was like apparent in everything. So not only in the assets of the game, but in the interactions they had with us and what they wanted to achieve. Everything was clear and they reacted quickly. So really a great bunch there. So they set themselves some challenges, and which I think was in the end made CUPHEAD such a big success. But for example, they had live music for the game, so which is not very common. The hand-drawn all the cell animation. So, and at first they even wanted to use gouache to paint all the cells by hand like they did in the 30s. Now, of course, it's still an indie studio, so they didn't have that budget, so they ended up painting that digitally, but still, they really pushed as much as they could for authenticity there. Every aspect of the characters were, I'd say, lovingly animated. They went to like little tiny details. Chad was like super strict on exactly what he wanted to see in the animations. We didn't do them, but we saw that process happening towards the end, and he would just simply not accept anything that was not meeting his standards. He would have them redone and reworked, etc. So, but always in a good and friendly manner. So that was great, and basically the gameplay timing was perfect. It was strange for us because they're not making games like we are used to. It's a different process. So basically, that was surprising to us at the end because a couple of weeks before release, we were still implementing some stuff in the levels, but it all fell into place like perfectly almost. So usually when we do a platformer level, it's an iterative process. We start out with blocks and just check out what the gameplay would look like. Then we create the art, see if it all works out. But they had all the art in their heads. They saw exactly what it would look like, and then there were kind of no surprises for them when everything was assembled. So we were able to ship the levels as is at the end. So it was really awesome. It was a stressful process because we're not used to that. It kind of takes nerves of steel, but they were confident, they knew what they were doing. So we followed along, and we're very glad we did. So just one of the typical game scenes. So that's the Medusa boss. That's one of the levels we actually had the level artist work on. So it was pretty black and placeholder assets all over the place when we picked it up, and we assembled all of that. So it was one of the scenes we worked on. So basically, by using us, iLLOGIKA and MDHR, they were able to focus on the magic of the game. So we took care of optimizing the game, managing memory, like managing localization, which will be coming sometime soon, tutorials, and all the many small tasks that end up in game making. So this is probably as they work for Iris Studio, something it's a model that I see emerging. Like indie studios, it doesn't always make sense to scale up to like 10, 15 people to finish production and then having to shrink back down after. So this is something that a company like us can help out with. We're not the only game in town, of course, but I think like offsetting like these types of production task programming in particular is becoming more and more common, and can help out not only the bigger studios but indies as well. It might be more costly per hour, but at the same time you don't have to lay off people at the end of the project, and you can actually reuse the same people for the next one afterwards. They stay as a cohesive team, and so they can be they can be hired again through the service company. So it's something that I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of in the next few years. What we did in programming, so those are a few of the main things we did. So asset integration. So there was not lots of like hardcore C# programming involved. There was a bit of that. So fixing like timing issues and implementing like really specific stuff for some characters, some bosses, but most of what the programmers did is like taking the assets, placing them in the right place, making sure they would run, and etc., and look all right at the correct import settings and whatnot. Something that was like probably the most involved in terms of programming was optimization. I'll show a few examples. Localization, so using a system to make sure we could support many languages. So that, as I said, will be coming sometime soon. Worked on a tutorial, integrated the world map as well. We did lots and lots and lots of bug fixes, and we ported like on the Windows Universal Platform. We also helped out on the Xbox platforms as well, and future platforms that will be announced perhaps sometime. And yeah, so just talking a bit about optimization. So CUPHEAD, like probably most 2D games, is it's pretty much memory bound. So there's no huge like polygon count, lots of things taking CPU or GPU power. So it's pretty lightweight, could actually run on the phone relatively easily. And yeah, but the biggest problem are all the large textures in the game. So most of the issues like players are encountering is that because they don't have enough RAM. Currently, it stands about you need about 2 gigs of RAM to the game, but there's a surprising number of PC players who actually don't have that amount in their PC. So it might be surprising at first, but CUPHEAD has a very large reach in the PC gaming community. So it picked up like lots of the older computers. So that became a kind of a big concern, and we had to, especially after release, work a lot on the optimization aspect of the game. So just to give you an example, so these are original spreadsheets that we got when we picked up the game. So as you can see, so they might be a bit small, but those are all 2048 by 2048 square textures, and they basically have one asset or one group of assets inside it, and the griddled space it's all transparency. It's all memory being taken in the game and loaded when you start the level for basically nothing. So so one of the biggest tasks was to reassemble all of that in something more coherent. So so as you can see, lots of dead space. Also, the image on the right, you can see lots of little assets in there, like the blue and pink bubbles. But sometimes it's more than sometimes they're often like the same assets that's just turning around 90, 100, 180 degrees, etc. So so what we did as well was to implement a feature where we would actually turn the asset around and not having multiple copies of it in memory. So So this is what the optimized spreadsheets look like a bit more. So we took other assets at the same level. We placed them in all the empty spaces, so it's not absolutely perfect. We could probably do a bit more, but still it saves up lots and lots of memory. We removed the duplicates, and with the ability to turn the objects, we were able to cram lots of little ones in the small spaces and have more space with the bigger ones. So it saved lots of memory there. Also, so turn sprites, and we split the spreadsheets per level. So at first, the spreadsheets were not really set differently. So one level would load like a bunch of unused assets, and in that particular level, so it just didn't make sense. So we cleaned all of that up. There was lots of work to do. There's lots of textures, and we had one programmer basically working full time for like 3 months just optimizing that. And one thing it's a simple thing to change, but it's worth mentioning. We streamed the music instead of loading it in memory. It was taking a huge amount of space, and since the game is not CPU bound, and even on old machines, it's not a problem to stream the music and really load it without taking memory space. Level art. So we had 2 level artists on the game. They came in around July when MDHR discovered that their own level artists could not do all of that work for release. So just to give you a bit of an overview, so each scene in CUPHEAD has about 6 or 7 layers of assets that need to be arranged in relation to each other. I'll show you an example afterwards. And these assets, these levels, these parallax levels, so they need to move in certain speeds in relation to each other, and those speeds may be different, and those directions may be different depending on the level, if you're going up or down, or if you're just going straight left to right. So level artists, they placed and replaced temporary assets. So they hit some layers in certain parts of the level, so they had to work in conjunction with the programmers to hide some layers when certain triggers were set. So we had specific scripts done by our programmers or the ones at MDHR to manage those layers. So, but usually the artists were able to do that part of the integration by themselves. And they optimized the world map. I'll show that in a second as well. And to give you an idea, for a run and gun level, it would take about a week, so 5 days of work for a level artist to integrate the existing assets, place them in the level, and make sure they all work out together. So we recognize one of the wall maps there. So we did a bit of work to optimize them. So on the left, you see like one of these wall maps. So at first, they were like really huge, so 2,848 pixels by 2,749. But that all got crunched in to a square texture to 2048 by 2048 because of some Unity limitations and platform limitations. So the world map looked really ugly. It was all blurry. So we had to do something about that. So they are made up of like 4 layers. So if you can read from here, but the back layer is water, and then we have land. Then we have the ripples. So in that example, there's 8 frames of water ripples, and there's the top layer with some details added on top. So all of that was split in 4 tiles, so much smaller resolution, but we were able to place them in the game without compressing them, so they look very, very sharp. They take lots of memory without being compressed, but they're only that being loaded in memory, so we're not within the level, so it's acceptable. So they actually look sharper than the rest of the game because they're not compressed, but that was a good trade-off for the game. So it took a bit of work because they have all these layers that were needed to be split and then rearranged and loaded in the game. So it took a few days of work there. Funny story about Jared's head. So Jared Moldenhauer is one of the Moldenhauer brothers, of course, co-founder of MDHR. And I don't know exactly why, but when we got the game, we had his head used as a placeholder everywhere. So we got his funny beard all over the place. So we used for pontoons, trees, mushrooms, mountains, great tents, everything in the game. So I guess it was to make sure that it would get replaced when the game shipped. But yeah, just another side story. So when we rushed to ship the game on September 29, there was an unfinished level still in the build, so we didn't have time to clean up. So the assets that were shipped, so they were not accessible through normal gameplay, but some enthusiastic people decided to disassemble the game and publish what they saw. So Jared's head was displayed all over the internet. So that actually looked like that sometimes when we looked at the game. So it was pretty good. All right, so so on the left, you can see what the levels look like when we pick them up. So that was one of on the left, the most completed level. So there was just a middle layer running. So actually that level had the right assets, but the foreground or the background layers were not present. So we had to implement all that, and that's what took about a week of work for a standard run and gun level. This one was even in the more like primitive state, if I can say. So it was actually using assets from other levels and clearly placeholder assets, as you can see on the left, that white blob. So they actually look like sometimes the real assets. So I was joking about Jared's head, but so it was not always used. So sometimes it was useful to have a placeholder to just have the right feeling, and I think that's how they were able to really adjust the timing. So the levels were all working, and the timing for the event, etc., was all done, but nothing looked like it should. So that was for us a gamble, but I think for Jared and Chad, the levels were clearly done in their head and in their imagination. So they had no surprise. So this one took a bit longer than a week to implement because there was lots of assets, even in the middle layer that needed to be replaced. Just a word about parallax layers. So on the left, you see what this looks like in the scene view in Unity by moving the camera left and right. So you see the background layers moving at a different speed and direction than the foreground, of course. And yeah, so everything needed to be tested out. So that was kind of a long process to make sure there were no holes appearing in the level, and then once we had done that in the editor, sorry, we had the QA tester, of course, going through the levels and making sure that nothing was showing through the assets. And on the right, you see what it looks like in the game. Another example, so this one shows the masking tricks. So basically, you'll see a layer of background being slid left and right in the cracks there. So So we always like trick the player to show the background moving at certain places. Sometimes also the player is no longer moving; it's just the background sliding when we're on the self-moving platform, for example. So we don't believe what we see. And this is a before and after video. Screen. As you can see, the placeholder assets look a bit like the real ones. I think we started work on this particular one. We checked the dates. It was late August, so very soon. Really sure that. No assets from other levels here. So that was for the level art part of our work. So in terms of production, that was mostly after release happened on September 29. Basically, the gang at MDHR became very, very busy. So actually accepting awards all over the world is pretty time-consuming. So we would send them emails or send them Slack messages, and it would go like for days or weeks before they could actually answer. There was just too much stuff to do, so they decided to assign us some of the production tasks, especially the items we were taking care of internally. So we had two producers working part-time at iLLOGIKA to manage that. Also, one of the Moldenhauer brothers, one that I didn't talk about yet, Ryan, was managing support at first, so getting the emails and messages from the users, and then it was dispatching that to us to answer with the proper response, but it became like too time consuming for him, and we could just basically take care of it. So we had one tester actually received that, and then the request, we forwarded that to one of the programmers, Marc-André, and then got the correct response, and that would be sent out to the user. So usually, I mean, most of the problems was because players had problems with their own PCs, rarely so with their Xboxes, because they're all the same. Yeah, lacking memory, or having a config problem, or like a video card that was made in the previous millennium or something. So we could respond to all of that. We also synchronized with MDHR and the external provider, so there was actually a QA company involved, Enzyme, that did the compatibility QA, and some of the functionality localization QA as well. So we did the coordination with them, especially after release. And yeah, so that's roughly production work. One thing to note about production is that when we picked up the project, it was using Trello, and at multiple times during production there was an intent to change that, because Trello is a cool project management software. It really works well for small projects, but during the last months of production for CUPHEAD, it was no longer a small project. There were like 20, 25 people total working on the project, 10 of us, etc. And everyone was synchronized through Slack and Trello. Like, we weren't the only team working at the single office. Everyone else was actually working from home. So the online tools needed to be kind of perfect to work. But we didn't have time, nobody had time to really change the process at that point. It was a bit risky as well to lose tasks and lose velocity. Every day counted. So pretty much got to just optimize the Trello board. So this one shows the process for QA, so for testing. So we had 3 like to do, doing, and done for the task, and then when it was addressed, then we got to Can3 Pro, PC to verify, Xbox to verify, and then the QA tester would pick it up, verify the fix, and place it afterwards in complete, or the MDHR people, Chad or Jared, would place it in complete and validate the fix. So that was the way we found it work better to organize the production. Something to note as well. So in Unity, it's always a bit of a challenge to really make sure there's no merge conflict. So when 2 people are working in the same scene, it can create some issues. So the way we work for that project is we create a card for each level, and when a programmer would start working on a level, he would just pick the card, placing it in the category, like I'm working on that, so people will always know who was working on what, and not like stepping on each other's toes. Worked fairly well, but I would absolutely recommend to use a tool like Jira to manage a project of that scale, but somehow we managed to make it work. Actually, we had never met the MDHR people in person, so when they came for the Montreal Game Summit in December, it was the first time we met in person. So we're all in Canada, but actually never got to meet, so I guess a pretty big place. So that was a good occasion, so they came in, we had a chat with them, so it was pretty fun. So that was showed Suzanne, the main producer on the team, meeting them, and myself in the back. Just a word on QA. So we were in charge of development tests on PC and Xbox One. As I said earlier, email support for users, and coordination with the testing vendors. So pretty straightforward there. A few observations and takeaway points. So yeah, as I was saying, MDHR, I mean, they are awesome people. They make everyone feel at ease. They were super dedicated to the success of the game. I mean, these guys, they remortgage their houses. They work all in on that game. And for us, I mean, we were just an external provider, so our stress level was like a fraction of what they felt at the time. But somehow they kept very, very positive. They were fun to interact with. So as I shown the Jared's email, so that was the same thing on Slack all the time. So they were like caps lock all the time. They were making jokes, and even if we were like 2 weeks before release, the atmosphere was still great. One thing like I want to point out is that they were always very grateful about the work we did. So even if it was a small task that we finished or nothing really great, I mean they were always very vocal about that, and it just helped out with team morale. So when the time came to do some overtime at the end, even if we really don't like that to go over 40 hours per week, but I mean I've never seen the team as happy as they were about actually putting more hours and coming in during the weekends. So they felt that they were part of something bigger than them, and they really enjoyed it. So we left it up to them to decide how much time they could do in overtime, and yeah, so it worked well. So just as a side note, we pay overtime 1.5x normal salary, so it was kind of a bonus for the team working on the project. All the comms were on Slack. So as I said, everybody else than us was working from home or from a co-working office or something. Yeah, so all of the communications went through the same channels. So I think it's essential for a remote team to use a common tool to work together and not have like the two places where things happen and people feeling left out. So even if we were in the same location, we would still communicate to each other through Slack. They were super responsive in DHR. They reacted quickly. One of the programmers, they came in, he was a bit overwhelmed on the first day, and he couldn't see what was the priorities. And he told Chad what the problem was, and the next morning, I think he worked all night, and he reprioritized everything like that was asked for the programmers to do. So they were very, very reactive, and people felt engaged and wanted to do more on the project. Everyone got along really well, lots of gratitude, and we met them in person when they came for MIGs in December. When they came, just a quick funny story, we sent Julien with that sign to pick them up at the airport, so we had a good time with them. We went to karaoke. Chad and Maya were pretty reasonable, but Jared, I think he's, as he said, he's like beyond feeling tired. It doesn't bother him anymore, so he'll just go on all night. Don't know where he finds this energy, but it's awesome to see. That's a picture at the Montreal Game Summit. So the kind of fireside chat with Jason there, talking about their experience, and they were really kind to give us a nice shout out to the crowd. So yeah, as always, they were very grateful, and they showed their appreciation. So awesome bunch. So on the left, you can recognize them. So it's Chad, Maya, who's Chad's wife, and Jared on the right. We took them out to see some CUPHEAD street art we have in Montreal. So we didn't make it, but some local fans did. So they were very curious to see that. So good there. And yeah, so I broached that a bit earlier. So winning awards requires time. So if you have a successful game, so it's a small problem. It's a good problem to have, but if you have to maintain and do quick batches after release, but you're stuck accepting, I don't know, video game awards, BAFTA, whatnot. I think they won like 25, 30 awards. It's incredible. So they added Brian to the management team, and that helped a lot. And adding us as the producers as well was a really good thing. It helped smooth out the process after release, and enabled us to keep continuing working on the game while they are working on other future projects. We had an open service contract with them, so they were we had a quick discussion, but they were not interested in sharing backend with external developers or freelancers, which is quite fine. So we had a simple work-for-hire contract with them, defining who was working on the project, a maximum number of hours for that person, and the overtime rates were planned in the contract. So the rates were bumped up by 50% if people went over 40 hours, which happened quite a bit at the end. And flexibility for those contracts was, I think, one of the key success factor to be able to deliver on time. Otherwise, it would have needed to hunt for freelancers all over the place, and it would have been probably a bit hit or miss. So the fact that we were able to provide more people as it became needed, I think that simplified their lives quite a bit. So again, that's one of the strengths of working with the service provider in that sense. So they can focus on actually making the game and making sure it's great. And yeah, as I said earlier, strong design, clear direction, save the day. Assembling levels 2 weeks before release is not something I would recommend. They'd probably do something else for the next one. But since they had such a clear direction and the levels were working like correctly, at least in their head. So we just did the integration, and amazingly it just works. I remember a conversation with Julien was like dubious, like 2 weeks before release, mid-September. He said, David, you know what, I'm still integrating stuff in the game, I'm not actually fixing bugs right now. So I'm not sure how we'll be able to manage, but somehow it just works. So we're very glad about that. So it's a different way of making games. It would probably be worth studying it in more details. There might be some things that can be adapted for other projects, but yeah, there are other ways than the best practices to make a game a success. Just a quick picture about the figure of a CUPHEAD and Mugman that was made by a gaming school in France. They gave us that last week, so we found it pretty neat. They had it 3D printed, so just an example of the fan reaction to the game. And I think it's a game we'll be hearing about for quite some time. I think it's genuinely part of video game history, at least for indie games. So it's very grateful that we were able to work on that. We had a great time working with Studio MDHR. We adapted continuously to let them shine, enable them to tweak and polish their art's content. Well, Chad would have cleaned and polished things up until Christmas, but we had to ship the game, so he was reasonable about that. But yeah, we got to meet all the deadlines, so I think that's one of our core values. So we want to deliver on time, on budget, and that's what they got. So very, very proud of that. All right, thank you very much. Just a quick picture of the team when they visited. So I had kind of a bad hair day there, but yeah. So any questions? Yeah.
I believe CUPHEAD got accepted into ECGC this year.
Sorry?
I believe CUPHEAD got accepted into summer games that quick this year.
Sorry, the CUPHEAD guy accepted?
No, like CUPHEAD, like the game got accepted into summer games that quick this year.
Okay.
So I believe it's part of that speedrunning marathon this summer.
Okay, it's possible. I'm not aware of it.
What
Yeah.
do you use for source control?
It was Git, basically, so very standard. This question there?
That was my question.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
Did you guys have any apprehension while working on the game with such a new card?
Sorry, so I think my hearing is bad. So.
It's okay. Were you guys all nervous working with the game with such a unique art style?
Oh yeah, that was definitely something that was a bit stressful, but not so much for the programmers, but for the level artists. So how to make that game shine and showcase the very different art style that it brings forward. So yes, it was different than what we were used to, but in the end, it's still a platformer game, and it's not assembled in a way that's very different from other such games. So and the art was just so beautiful. Just it shined through. So I don't think it was a huge problem, but it certainly created some excitation, and people were really happy and nervous about that. Yep.
If there's one thing that you could go back and do differently, what would it be?
Differently, so in terms of production, I mean, like even if it was a fun project, crunching at the end is it's not the most pleasant thing. So we could have added more people at first. So as I've shown, we had 3 programmers available. It would have made sense at that point to add all of these together. So probably have saved lots of headaches at the end. How do we? So now that we have a good relationship with them, so if we work with them on a second project, then we have a better understanding of their production speed, etc. So we would have the correct people at the correct time. Yep.
Have you noticed a lot more interest in your company after the CUPHEAD launch?
Oh, definitely, definitely. So just last January, we signed our biggest contract ever. To do it. So it's a different type of game, it's a mobile free-to-play, but showing that we actually worked on CUPHEAD was kind of gave us credentials that we didn't have before. So we definitely, in the eyes of potential clients, made us change leads. Of course, yeah. It was. I think it's a major piece in our portfolio. Yep.
Do you get any indication that MDHR wants to make more games? Are they thinking of making more projects?
Oh yeah, they're not stopping at this point. I don't have lots of details, and what I know I obviously can't tell at this point, but yeah, they're not done with game making, so rest assured. Yep.
Is it hard to set your own, like, I guess, your company's projects aside so that you can do some of this contract work? Yeah,
it's hard because I mean, let's say for Siberia, it's hard to keep pace and keep the game going in the right direction. So there's lots of actually time and money lost on those projects because we kind of sometimes the people who were working like 6 months before the project are no longer available. They're working on a service project, and you can't just transfer a brain from one person to the next. And it's also like picking up a book after not reading it for a few months. Sometimes you just have to start from the beginning because you don't remember what it was all about. So we had to go back and redo lots of stuff. So now we're doing a better job at actually assigning people to the project. But it's easier to do when we're 40 people than when we were actually like 8 or 9 people. So we have more flexibility. I mean, projects like the revenues from the service projects can keep a few people working continuously on our own. So it's less of a problem now, but yeah, at first it was very different. Yep.
Did the team ever upgrade versions of Unity mid-production, or did you guys just keep it safe there?
We kept it safe. No need to break something that's not broken. It was working on Xbox. So yeah, we kept it as is. Yep.
If I can ask this question clear enough, you guys entered into development kind of late into the game's cycle. Was there a lot of clear documentation and stuff like that for you guys to make it a little bit easier to jump in and help them with continuing and finishing the project?
There was not lots of written documents for us to read and get up to speed, but they would provide everything pretty much in real time to help us understand what the intent was. And it's not it's a platformer game, so it's fairly easy to understand. There are some intricacies in there, but they can be explained pretty quickly. So they would provide explanations directly on Slack or provide some diagrams to show what needed to be done, but still the levels were working, so we just had to play them, even if they were very dark and not having lots of assets, so we could understand what was needed there. Yep.
So obviously, dark representation is very like frames, spreadsheet, just
how many frames?
like all the different intricate movements that need to be exact.
Yeah. I don't have the exact numbers, but yeah, they would I don't know, 30, 40 frames for an animation, something about that, depending on the asset. Yep.
You mentioned that you guys put the game to UWP. So what's the process like? Because those two are very, very different from Unity to UWP.
It's probably of the three platforms on which the project was published, it's the most complex. But of course, I mean, there's no support for phones or for devices that are not computers. So it was kind of straightforward. We did that before for let's say Deus Ex Go, or I think we did it for Lara Croft Go as well. So it's not that complex. You just have to follow the documentation. It's fairly well written. It's used to be a lot more complex on that side, but since Windows 10, it's a lot more doable. There's no crazy things like before that. If a game had in-app purchase, you had to release it like really quickly in the country where people would not see it, like Zimbabwe or something. Test it out, close it down. So no, that's no longer the case. It's pretty good. All right, so no more questions. So thank you for your attention. I'll be around, so if you have more questions, want to chat, I'll be by the Canada booth today until about 3 p.m. So don't hesitate to come and see me. Thank you very much.